Greetings, Legionnaires! Just wanted to stop by quick, just take a moment away from this game, God of War, to tell you about my thoughts, a little review in progress for you guys. Now, I've played a lot of this game over the past weekend here, April 20th to the 22nd or whatever, 2018. But I want to talk to you guys a little bit about my thoughts so far with the game, and how I'm enjoying it, and what things I like, what things I don't like, and maybe help you make an informed decision on if you should actually pick it up or not if you haven't already. Now, God of War is an interesting case because it's not a reboot. It's a continuation of the franchise, but they just kind of renamed it, or they took away the 4, and they just were like, it's just going to be God of War. So for anyone who isn't up to speed on the God of War franchise, basically you're playing as this guy named Kratos. He's the Ghost of Sparta, that's what they call him. And in the previous 3 installments, and there's a bunch of offshoots too, he went around murdering every Greek god you could possibly think of, just about. Now, he is hanging out over in the Norse realm, as it were, fighting some Norse gods and some other creatures over there. So that kind of brings you up to speed. Another thing that's really different about this game, and one of the reasons I think they kind of went back to calling it just God of War and kind of starting over, at least with the title, with the franchise, is that it's tonally very different. So if you're going into this game thinking it's like going to be kind of like the just overbearing macho, like crazy brutality of the first 3 games, then it's not exactly that. There is some of that still, for sure. There's definitely brutality. That's totally in there, as you guys can probably see coming up here. But it's not the same tone. It's much more serious, much more somber. I think a lot of people would compare this to something like The Last of Us, and I can definitely see that comparison. You know, you're playing this kind of older guy who's got this younger companion, and you're going through a brutal world. But this is definitely more fantastical. There's so many different cool things and places and spaces to fight and explore. And unlike the previous 3 games, and I've actually played all of those, it definitely puts more of an emphasis on the lore, which is really cool. It kind of talks about a lot of things that, are like supposed to happen or have happened, and things like that. You're kind of learning. It's like Norse mythology 101. And that is really cool, really fascinating to me, because when you come up against these creatures or these other gods or whatever else you're going to run into, you might even have a little bit of stuff to go on before you even meet them. And that is so cool. And there's a lot of talking back and forth between Kratos and his son, Atreus, I believe. Atreus? Yeah, there it is. And those two are kind of like the 2 main characters. There's a lot of banter back and forth. And then Atreus kind of being the kind of wide-eyed and kind of interested in this whole big world. And Kratos very world-weary, as you could imagine he would be from the past games. Not a big fan of gods. He wanted to live his life. He keeps trying to get out, and they keep pulling him back in. But how is the game? Is it fun? Yes, it's really fun. The combat and the exploration, those are pretty much the primary things that you do in this game. Exploration, it's not going to be something like Assassin's Creed or Tomb Raider. The climbing is very, linear. It's more of like what you'd find in kind of like an Uncharted, which is totally fine. It's not as free roam or anything like that. But the combat is good. I think it's really solid. It feels very weighty. If anybody plays any other kind of third-person action games, more so I compare it again to like the Souls series, and I don't want you guys to think that oh man, he's just saying it's The Last of Us meets Dark Souls. It's not that, but there are elements to it. So unlike the previous God of War titles where the camera was zoomed out a bit more and it wasn't always right behind Kratos, it was kind of up wherever you needed it to be, really, to see everything coming at you. This one's a little bit more tight, so there's going to be a lot of monsters that are coming up from behind you and trying to attack you. That's probably one of my biggest complaints about the game. It's that you get these enemies who kind of come up from behind you, and sometimes your companion will be like, hey, behind you, watch out, or there'll be like a little indicator, but sometimes that's hard to see in the middle of a fight, so it can be kind of aggravating occasionally, because you get hit and you think, man, there's no way I could have seen that coming, so you gotta move, you gotta shake. But the combat is very good. It feels really good. I should say that it's got this visceral brutality that kind of reminds me of my time with Gears of War, in that once you get the cadence down of some of these fights, it feels so gratifying because the hits are so good, especially like the executions and pulling off like a really good combo. It just feels really nice. You're not just kind of using the same combos like you would have in the previous games. You kind of have to adapt to all these other things, and you have different abilities that you've never had before. And doing all these things and putting it together feels very good. It's very gratifying. It's cool to see how they've changed it up from the old, kind of monsters I'm used to fighting. And there's definitely some similarities I see here and there with these new things, but it's definitely a new ball game. And I really enjoy it. And that is kind of the big thing about this game, is that it is the combat. Obviously, that's like, it's God of War. I mean, it's right there in the title. Like, you're not going to be walking around trying to be diplomatic with everybody. But I think the emphasis on that and the emphasis on story is what really changes this game up from, what it could have potentially been if they would have just said, hey, we're just going to take God of War 4 and just be like, all right, we have the formula down, let's just put Norse stuff in there instead, just reskin it. It's definitely not that. There's definitely elements and callbacks, nods to the previous games, and it really does help, I think, a little bit to have that prior knowledge, because you just get a little bit more out of it. You just kind of say, oh yeah, I remember that. Or when someone says, oh my gosh, you killed that thing. How did you kill that thing? And you're thinking, yeah, I've killed plenty bigger. Which is great. There's obviously a connection with the character. The one thing that is kind of strange about Kratos, though, is that in those past games, he was just a rage-fueled monster. Now he is a little more hesitant, or he's a little more reserved, which is kind of, I think it's a good step for the character. But the fact that he kind of tells his son a lot how to be in control seems really hypocritical. And this wouldn't bother me as much if I hadn't played 3 full games of him just murdering everything and hurting every even person that was in his path. So it's a little weird if you don't have a prior knowledge with the pre-existing franchise. It's a good and bad thing, because like I said, it's good because you have all these nods that you're like, oh yeah, I remember that, or oh yeah, there you go. But there's some other times where you're like, would Kratos really do that? Would Kratos again, these are little nitpicky things. The rest of the game is really fun. It's really enjoyable. There is a pretty significant skill system built in. There's a lot of emphasis on armor and enchantments and leveling all that up. And that is a whole thing unto itself, because in previous games it was typically you had a few weapons and then you kind of powered them up and picked skills from other gods that you would get powers from. But yeah, I would say this is a really, really solid and fun game. I know a lot of people have been going around, a lot of people have been saying it's perfect, a 10 out of 10. I don't know if I would say it's that. I haven't gotten to the end of the game yet. I've played a lot of it, but it's very, very good. I've really been enjoying my time with it. I enjoy the combat. I think that's solid and great. I think it feels really good. It's a little annoying. I wish you could pull the camera back just a smidge, and I might be able to play with that in settings a little bit too. Obviously, this is very focused, and the entire game is all in one shot. And so what that means is they never cut to black. They never do any of that. It's usually all all in one continuous shot, which is kind of cool. I like the characters. A lot of the side characters are really cool. They add a lot of levity to a lot of the situations, because Kratos is kind of just he's very straightforward. He's the straight man. He's just kind of, but he even has a few moments where I kind of scoffed or chuckled at something he'd said. But yeah, it's great. There's some really crazy boss fights. The very first one you get into with this guy, which is not really too much of a spoiler, but his name is Baldur, and you really get a cool sense of how amazingly fun this game can be pulled into this close focused camera in these certain moments, because you really feel like you're that person flying around, jumping around, just punching this dude, getting thrown about. It's very cool. It's very cool to send him flying and have him go through a couple of trees, and very anime, which I like a lot. If you guys know me, I really dig that. So yes, I would recommend it. If you have PlayStation 4, you're probably already playing it. If you're kind of on the fence about it and you've seen the older games and you're like, I'm not sure if that's it for me, I would still recommend giving it a shot. There's a different difficulties. I play on the normal one, and that's a pretty significant challenge a lot of the time. And there are levels to the monsters, so sometimes you can see that you're fighting something that's 2 or 3 levels ahead of you, and you're like, I should probably come back to this later. So it has those RPG aspects in the game, if that's what you're into. So yeah, and it's incredible. The world is technically very pretty, very proficient. looks great, sounds great, some incredible sound design and monster design, and just all around the budget's there. Like this game's got the budget, it's got the money, so wouldn't be a waste of your time at all. I don't know how long the actual campaign is, but it seems like there's a lot there, and there is a lot of endgame stuff for you as well. So if that's what you're into, cool. But if you have any more specific questions about the game, please feel free. You can either comment down below, or you can just tweet at me. I'm at JimmyGood013 anytime, just let me know. If you enjoyed this little review in progress, please like the video, subscribe, do all that fun stuff. But if you really want to support us, just share us with a friend. That can help a ton. We really appreciate that. Or you can head over to patreon.com/criticalreviews. Throw in $1, that definitely helps. But don't you fear, a real, condensed, pure review is coming out. So it's coming. Don't you worry about it. But this is just here for now. But I want to know, for anybody who's watching this who maybe is already playing the game, what do you think about it? Do you love the game? Do you think it's a 10 out of 10? Do you think it's one of the greatest games? I want to know what you guys think about this game. Thank you guys so much for stopping by. I really do appreciate it. And just remember to adapt and overcome.